organizations an opportunity to share about the work that they're doing, the work that they'll be doing in the future, resources that they have available, and any priorities of their organization they'd like to share today. And from my own experience, these webinars tend to be very densely packed with information and they move pretty fast, but have no fear because we are recording this and you can refer back to that if you missed anything. So I hope that those who are listening in hear about some new resources or initiatives that will be helpful for the work that they're doing. Next slide, please, Jessica. So as I said, this webinar will be recorded and we'll be posting it to NCEP's website along with the slides during today's webinar. Our website is listed on the slide here. If you have questions during today's webinar, please put them in the Q&A box and we'll try and answer them with the time that we have left after each of our member organization representatives has a turn to share the work that they're doing. Any unanswered questions that we receive will be collected and we'll route them to our speakers to answer as follow-up. And then if you have a question for a specific speaker, please indicate who you'd want that question directed to when you type it out. Finally, if you haven't already signed up for the NCEP listserv, you can sign up using the My NARUC link listed on the slide. And if you think of anybody who would benefit from joining this listserv, please feel free to share this link with them. We always want to be sharing the work that NCEP and its member groups are doing. Next slide, please, Jessica. So this is the agenda for today's webinar. I'm going to kick us off with a brief overview of NCEP and some of the resources and events that we have had and some that we have planned. And then each of our member organization representatives will spend a few minutes sharing the work that their organization is doing in this order. Next slide, please. And one more. So a quick introduction on the National Council on Electricity Policy itself. NCEP is a unique forum funded thanks to the Department of Energy, and it brings together state decision makers across the country who work on electricity policy. Our member groups are shown on the right of the slide here. They're the National Association of State Utility Consumer Advocates, or NASUCA, the National Conference of State Legislatures, or NCSL, the National Association of State Energy Officials, or NASEO, the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, or NARUC, the National Governors Association, or NGA, and the National Association of Clean Air Agencies, or NACA. And so these state decision makers come together to talk about emerging electricity-related issues, things like how new technologies and changing policies, regulations, and markets impact their states and the electricity system as a whole, and how to deal with those changes. It also provides a convening opportunity for each of these organizations to share their own knowledge, their perspectives, and priorities, and helps them facilitate a nuanced discussion about electricity issues and how to address them from their own individual perspectives. Next slide, please. NCEP is led by an executive committee made up of representatives of each of the member organizations that you can see listed here. We're led by our president, Commissioner Chenola Brown Bland of North Carolina, and our vice president, Chair Gillette of Connecticut. We're very excited to welcome our newest member, Mr. John Espindola, who joins us from Alaska's Office of the Governor. So welcome to him. And this executive committee is composed of really engaged decision makers, and they help provide leadership and input on the types of events that NCEP holds throughout the year, the direction of NCEP as an organization. They also serve to make sure that the priorities and focus of each of their organizations is being upheld in the work that NCEP does. Next slide. So speaking of direction of the organization, I wanted to announce that the NCEP Executive Committee chose a focus or theme of 2023 that's centered around affordability. We wanted to select a theme for the year that would help guide the content and events that NCEP is planning for the year, and we kept it fairly broad within the topic of affordability so we could explore a variety of issues. And so some of the topics that we might explore throughout the course of the year are issues around equity, policies and programs that have been effective at lowering customers' electricity bills, how energy burden information is calculated and used, and other topics that are listed here, as well as beyond these topics. Next slide, please. And so now I want to talk about some of our upcoming events and resources. We do have our annual meeting planned for late summer. We don't have a date just yet. We're planning to have it in person in the great city of Indianapolis. We had a very successful annual meeting in DC this past September, which focused on the evolving customer and the variety of ways that customers are engaging with the electricity system and ways policymakers can continue to enable that while also protecting them at the same time. And then on the topic of resources, NCEP has been building an archive of resources for the benefit of our members and anybody who's interested in reading them. We have actually 2 new resources to share under our mini guide series, which is an interview-based series that highlights successful examples of collaboration and engagement between NCEP member groups. We published 1 mini guide in late 2022 focused on transportation electrification and the roles and opportunities for collaboration between state PUCs, state energy offices, and departments of transportation. We also published another mini guide just this month, so it's very hot off the press, on PUCs and the investment community and how these 2 groups can meaningfully engage with each other. In addition to this, we have an archive of other mini guides that we've listed here, and they cover a variety of roles and relationships between different NCEP member groups. And we also have one in the works on how NACA works and collaborates with air regulators. In addition to our mini guides, we have a transmission and distribution resource catalog available for those who are interested. It has over 200 resources available of transmission on the topic of transmission and distribution coordination, but we're always looking for updates to ensure that it's comprehensive and relevant. So if there's any resources you see that you'd like to add to that, please reach out. My contact information is on this slide deck. And with that, I will kick us off with our member updates, and I'll start with David Springy with NASEO.
Well, hi, everyone. My name is David Springy. I'm the Executive Director of the National Association of State Utility Consumer Advocates. Kind of a mouthful, so we just go by NASEO. I wanted to thank the National Council on Electricity Policy for hosting these periodic forums. I know that for most of my members are small consumer advocate offices, and having access and a relationship with the other national organizations is just a huge benefit to us and to our members to help share information and piggyback on some of the resources that the other national associations have. So much kudos to NCEP and thank you to my fellow national associations that participate in this. Go ahead, next slide, please. So just real quick, I know probably most of you know who NASEO is, but I thought I'd start with just a quick recap. We are the state statutory consumer advocates to the extent that the NARUC commissioners are state statutory regulators. We are the agencies and organizations of government that are statutorily tasked with representing consumers before the public utility commissions, legislatures, and the federal courts. We have about 60 members. So we have 60 members, not about. We operate in 44 states, the District of Columbia, Barbados, Puerto Rico, Jamaica. And again, we're some organization within the state government. A lot of our offices live within the state attorney general's office. But there are also associate and affiliate members who are recognized state advocates. Think the Utility Reform Network in California, some of the Michigan Cub and some of the Cubs, Minnesota Cub, AARP, NCLC. So a lot of the consumer representatives. Go ahead, next slide, please. Just a quick picture of sort of where there are statutory advocates and where there are not. I always hope to color in these boxes that need coloring in soon, but you can kind of see we cover the vast majority of the country in the IOU space. So I just wanted to give you a visual. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, most of our consumer advocate offices are smaller organizations. Therefore, NASEO itself is a small organization. We don't have the type of uplift and heft that some of the other national associations do. But I did want to highlight a few things that we have done. And so we had our national annual meeting in November. Just for reference, normally in a normal year, if you go to the NARUC meeting in November, NASEO is there. So come find us, look for us. We have great panels and great work. We did do 2 quick policy resolutions around advancing equity and affordability in utility regulation and federal telecommunications equity and diversity. These are big topics for us. These were hard to wrestle down. We have a very diverse membership across the country, so we're very proud of these. All of this information is on the NASEO website, which is just naseuca.org. You can pop over and grab it. Most of this is on the front page. So I wanted to highlight those. The next thing I wanted to highlight is that we have been putting together some regulatory basics courses. A lot of our members, probably like a lot of your members, are having a lot of workforce turnover. We have a lot of new people, brand new to regulation, and it's a very technical area. So we started to put together some just regulatory basics courses, some stuff that when someone walks through the first day, you can send them over and they can learn about revenue requirements. They can learn about what cost of service means. They can learn about return on equity calculations and testimony. Not meant to replace the NARUC rate schools, which are fabulous rate schools out there, but this is something that you can show somebody that walks through the door on their first day to get them started. These are free and on our website too. Again, nasuka.org. I encourage anybody that wants to sort of start getting the basics to come visit. We are building this out. It's a little new. We'll be adding to this year, but I just wanted to highlight that. Next slide, please. We also do some grid training. DOE does provide some support through the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. We did 2 grid trainings at our annual meeting in November. I've listed them there. But I did want to highlight that again on our website, we've been doing this series for years, and all of the prior grid training and slide decks and webinar presentations are on our website. So it's a great resources around technology and distribution development and some of the topical issues. So again, if you've got somebody new that just needs some things to read, there's some good stuff on the NASUCA website, and we appreciate the support that DOE and LBNL provide in trying to help our members stay current on some of these issues. So very much appreciated. Next slide. A couple things coming up that I want to highlight. Again, we'll be doing more DOE training. We've got a 4-part webinar series that we're putting together, and then we will do something at our summer meeting. We are also standing up a multi-part webinar series. NASUCA did do a policy resolution in 2019 that's sort of basic residential RV or EV focused, but we're starting to look more broadly at public charging, light heavy duty trucking, cost allocation, and rate design, the types of things that are going to impact consumers and consumer rates as we go forward and electrify. So more information on that. I do want to highlight now, while I did say earlier that we are always with NARUC in November, we actually are going to flip that this year. So I just wanted to give everyone a heads up. This year, we're actually going to join NARUC at their summer meeting in Austin in July. And we will be doing our own meeting in November, somewhere to be determined. But again, if you go to the NARUC meeting in July in Austin, Texas, look for us. We'll be there. We have a great conference. All commissioners, PUC commissioners, and PUC commission staff are welcome to attend any of our session. Industry, should pay. And then I, of course, extend that same invitation to some of our other in-group members. They're happy to have you drop by and check us out. So I just wanted to highlight that even though we're almost always with NARUC in November this year, we decided to flip the script. So I keep trying to communicate that. Last slide, please, I think. And then just some contact information. Again, you can grab me at any time. Check our website. We do have some good resources for as small as we are. We're trying to put some good things that are actually useful to sort of the average regulator out there and people that are trying to get active in this space. So give us a read. Feel free to contact me. And again, thank you so much for allowing us to participate.
Hi, everyone. Thanks to NCEP for having us today. My name is Dan Shea. I am a program principal in the energy program at the National Conference of State Legislatures. For anyone who isn't familiar with NCSL and our mission, we support and provide educational resources for all state legislators and legislative staff across the country and in several Canadian provinces as well, and also the territories and commonwealths. Can we go to the next slide, please? It's sort of the same thing, but we can go one more. Thank you very much. So we've had several recent, we've got several standing groups and commitments that since the last meeting are worth highlighting. Our task force on energy supply met twice, once in July in association with our annual legislative summit in Denver. That July meeting included tours of Excel's trading floor and community solar. This group contains state legislators and staff from across the country and is a bit sort of broad. It focuses on really any emerging issue relevant to legislators and state policy. The sessions in this at the July meeting included transmission planning, decommissioning and recycling of energy infrastructure, and decarbonization through electrification and efficiency efforts. We also met in December in San Diego. That meeting included sessions on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act and some of the relevant provisions in those two congressional actions that were relevant to states and to energy issues. Another session included maintaining affordability and reliability during the energy transition. The next meeting of the task force will be in Indianapolis in August, again, in association with our legislative summit that will be happening around the same time. Also, around the time of that Energy Supply Task Force meeting in Denver, we hosted our Energy Policy Summit, which is a sort of another opportunity, more open for attendees of the legislative summit to dive a bit deeper into some energy issues. We explored the role of electricity markets in a changing grid, managing the energy transition, and energy justice. The Nuclear Legislative Working Group is another of our standing groups that focuses dually on both nuclear power and sort of commercial waste issues, but then also on the cleanup of the nuclear weapons complex. That group met in New Orleans from November 29th through December 1st in association with a larger DOE-sponsored intergovernmental groups meeting. We looked at state and federal policies to support the existing nuclear fleet, the Inflation Reduction Act, and some of the provisions relevant to advanced reactor development, and then nuclear waste and consent-based siting and workforce issues. The next meeting of NLWG will be in June or July, and the location is still to be decided. And then we have our Legislative Energy Horizon Institute, also known as LEHI. This is a program that's been around since 2009. We put it on in collaboration with the Pacific Northwest Economic Region. But it is open nationally at this point. It's really kind of a crash course for an educational series for state, provincial, local policymakers on energy infrastructure and delivery systems to give them a good foundation as they go into their work. That meeting is held always in two sessions, once in Richland, Washington, and then another in Washington, D.C. You can see the dates for last year's sessions listed on the slide. This year, we're going to be hosting those in July 7th through 11th in Richland and October 11th through 14th in D.C., I believe. Next slide, please. In terms of our publications, recently, we have finished our three-part legislative review on energy security in collaboration with our partners at DOE's Office of Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response. This is something we've done kind of biannually to review legislative trends related to a variety of energy security issues. You can see the three focus areas here: cybersecurity and physical security, disaster planning, and ensuring a reliable service, and then recovery and response. Next slide, please. Some additional publications. We have a brief that sort of highlights the role of state legislatures in accessing certain FEMA funding for energy resilience, including the Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities, BRIC programs, and then also HMGP, Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. We have a report on state policies around microgrids that came out, and also a recent contribution to the Journal of Critical Infrastructure Policy on state nuclear policy in the states, looking at how states have addressed various aspects of related to nuclear power. So next slide, please. We have a magazine that we contribute to regularly, as you can see here. 3 recent articles on various different issues. several related to protecting critical infrastructure. This is sort of more focused on the recent trend related to physical attacks, and then energy resilience, and also federal policies to support state transitions to lower carbon power. Next slide, please. Upcoming publications, our 2022 Legislative Energy Trends Report, that's an annual review of state energy trends, will be coming out. We have a few different publications that I'm pretty excited about: performance-based regulation primer for state legislators, transmission planning, integrated distribution system planning. All of these, I think, are really going to be beneficial for our members to familiarize themselves on some of these complex and emerging issues. Then we've got the role of nuclear in the clean energy transition, and another FEMA publication geared toward tribal nations. Next slide, please. We're also trying to not just do reports and written materials, but engage members in a number of different ways. So our NCSL Town Hall is a kind of live broadcast that works to provide accessible and approachable discourse on a certain topic. So we had one on how states are working to strengthen the energy system following the publication of that energy security report. We've also got podcasts, one of which looked at the IIJA and IRA and how those laws could impact the energy system. Next slide, please. Finally, webinars. We have an upcoming 2023 spring webinar series. This is part of our broader energy, environment, and transportation program, but the energy relevant webinars will take place on April 21st. That's energy storage as resilience, and June 16th, which is integrated utility system planning, factoring in the distribution grid. That's going to build off of our publication of the distribution system planning primer. Next slide, please. And then finally, we've got a number of newsletters that you all might be interested in. The News Reactor, sort of self-explanatory, follows the Nuclear Legislative Working Group, but also provides state and industry updates plugged in similarly, but more broadly for energy as a whole, with, again, a focus on state legislative action. Now we have an environment and natural resources update, and also Capital to Capital is more a focus on state, federal, sort of providing a briefing for state legislators on what's happening on the Hill. Next slide, please. And with that, I don't want to overstep my time, so happy to take any questions, but I appreciate the opportunity again to provide this update. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take over next. My name is Kirsten Rucklas. I'm Senior Managing Director for Electricity and Energy Security at the National Association of State Energy Officials, or NASEO. And thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to present here and give some insights onto what we've been up to and what sort of some of our future projects are. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. Just a brief overview of who NASEO is. We are the only national nonprofit association for the governor designated energy officials from each of the 56 states, the District of Columbia, and the territories. And we serve as a resource for our members on a lot of different variety of topics, but we also advance the interest of our members before Congress and the administration. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we have a variety of programs and priorities that mirror kind of what the state energy offices are working on. They range from working on building, electricity issues, transportation issues, financing and workforce, state energy planning. We also have a lot of cross-cutting issues such as equity, resilience, and some of the other items you see here. Next slide. So I'll focus on some of the NASEO programs and activities. This is by no means all of what NASEO is doing, but I just wanted to give you a flavor of what's been happening over the last 6 months and then sort of the future outlook. So NASEO has been working a lot on transmission and distribution policy. As you might know, the state energy offices are increasingly becoming involved in transmission and distribution policy and planning. And so we've supported them. The NASEO Board of Directors last summer had a resolution to encourage state energy offices and support them to get more engaged in transmission and distribution planning. As well as some of the state energy, or as most of the state energy offices are now engaged in IIJA and resilience funding to consider grid enhancing technologies for the transmission sector. And you can find all of those policy resolutions. This was just one example on the NASEO website under policy. We've also been very much supporting our members, the state energy offices, on 4101D, grid resilience and GRIP implementation. We have standing calls with our members every month. We provide technical assistance. And over the next year to 2 years, we will be working closely with the other national associations to provide technical assistance on grid resilience, not just to our members, but to all of our organization members. We also, together with NARUC, have a microgrid state working group. We have several things planned for this year. We have a state microgrid policy, programmatic and regulatory framework under development. We also will be developing 2 memos on key microgrid related topics. And we have a webinar series as part of this working group. The next one is scheduled for March 2023. But there'll be periodic webinars throughout the year. And the webinars will focus on different topics that are related to the working group, but we also have a site visit planned, most likely in the Washington, D.C. area later this year. We also have a lot of activities around clean hydrogen. NASEO has, with its state members, a clean hydrogen working group. And we also have a very robust library on our website on clean hydrogen, which includes a clean hydrogen map that provides a visual overview of state level activities that are driven by state agencies, which includes application for hydrogen hubs, includes roadmaps, legislation, and any kind of other initiatives and partnerships that were led by state entities. So I encourage you to check that out if you're interested. In terms of clean transportation, NASEO is working very closely with AASHTO on several regional workshops and working group that have been going on over the course of the last year, and the workshops have been going on over the course of the last month or so on NEVI implementation. We also, together with NARUC, have an initiative on DER integration and compensation, which focuses on figuring out how we can support our members and providing technical assistance to our members on DER aggregation and market areas for FERC Order 2222, as well as DER considerations for non-market areas. And we had a very successful workshop in September of last year talking about interconnection issues and some of the issues surrounding DER integration. NASEO, together with NARUC, also has the GEB working group, which is the Grid Interactive Efficient Buildings Working Group. And they have bi-monthly forums of state energy offices and PUCs. And in January, we just had a PNL presentation on cybersecurity and DERs, which is also the subject of another project of NASEO's, which is the solar cybersecurity project. And for that project, there'll be a toolkit coming out over the next month or so, looking at cybersecurity for solar and DERs. Next slide, please. I just wanted to briefly mention, we have a bunch of publication that came out and that will be coming out soon. You should, if you're interested in transmission, we also have 2 transmission guides coming out in the spring, as well as a paper on energy equity in research and development. And just highlighting a couple of papers here that we released over the last 6 months. One on critical minerals, sort of a primer. What are critical minerals? Why are they important? What are some considerations for state energy offices? And then 2 papers on how to take advantage of the BRIC program, a really practical action guide on how state agencies can coordinate and leverage some of the BRIC funding for grid resilience. And next slide. So just a few upcoming events. If you go to the NASEO events page, they're all listed there and you can register there. NASEO has regional meetings coming up in May and June, as well as the AASHTO NASEO EV charging infrastructure meetings that I already mentioned. I also wanted to highlight the Energy Security Boot Camp that is open to state agencies, so not just state energy offices, but anybody from the state agencies working on energy security and energy security planning. And then last slide, I couldn't do this alone. So I have a great team. Catherine Reed and Kelsey Jones are amazing and work with me on the electricity side, but there's a whole NASEO staff that works on the projects I mentioned today. So please feel free to check out the NASEO staff list on the NASEO website. And I look forward to your questions. And with that, I will turn it over to Danielle.
Thank you, Kirsten and colleagues. It's great to be with all of you today and always get to learn what you're up to in addition to the things that we have going on at NARUC. Next slide. Many of you probably know NARUC is the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners. The NARUC Center for Partnerships and Innovation is one of the departments at NARUC. Next slide. NARUC represents the public utility commissioners or regulators across the states who oversee investor-owned utilities in particular that regulate electricity, natural gas, water, telecommunications, and other utilities depending on the state. Next slide. The Center for Partnerships and Innovation, our team, specifically is dedicated to providing technical assistance to our commissioners and commission staff members, focused on emerging challenges and connecting them with expertise, strategies, developing relationships, and designing resources. You can find a newly updated CPI fact sheet on our website. The link is below, and Sarah's going to put a direct link in the chat. That is just a two-pager that includes direct links to many of the items I'm going to mention today, plus more since we have such a limited time together. Next slide. The Center for Partnerships and Innovation covers a wide range of topics, pretty much the breadth of the energy system at this point. We are focused on activities that support our members' thoughtful decision-making around energy generation and the transition, energy transmission and transmission distribution coordination, key technologies related to energy distribution grid, and the customer side of the meter. We also have a robust set of programming related to critical infrastructure, cybersecurity, and resilience, and you'll hear a little bit more about that. There is contact information at the end of my slides for our leadership team who are mentioned and referenced here, and to the rest of the team as well. And we're grateful to the U.S. Department of Energy, NIST, and our members for their partnership to enable all of this hopefully valuable work. Next slide. So today I was going to specifically mention a few, actually many of the recent webinars and publications that we have been producing over the last 6 months since we last had one of these events, and also give you a preview of some of the many forthcoming events that we're going to be running over through the end of 2023. So just a quick snapshot, this is not the breadth of all of the past webinars, but we do have a monthly innovation webinar series that covers a wide range of topics and always includes some real-world examples, practical experiences from the field around innovations happening in the energy and electricity systems. So you can find recordings and presentations from those past innovation webinars on our website, and you'll get a view of what that website link is again later. We've also been particularly prolific in releasing new resources, publications over the last 4 or 5 months. Earlier this month at the New York Winter Policy Summit in DC, we just released 3 state energy justice roundtable series papers. These were a collaborative effort that were the result of a NARUC, NASEO, National Governors Association, and colleagues event in 2022. One is focused on customer affordability and arrearages. There is a paper on energy justice metrics and one on participation in decision-making. These are all focused on principles and frameworks that are used in these various areas. What are some of the innovations in the space, and where can you connect with other entities to find more detailed information? So they're 10 to 12 page brief that can give you a good start on what's going on in these specific spaces. I heard performance-based regulation mentioned by some colleagues earlier. We just published a paper on the possibility of supporting demand flexibility in particular within PBR. Demand flexibility being energy efficiency, active efficiency, advanced demand response, and DER integration, and how that can be advanced as many states are thinking about the next phase of their energy efficiency and DER programs through PBR frameworks and how those are established, what kinds of performance incentive mechanisms there are, et cetera. That also features 3 specific examples from the states of Hawaii, Vermont, and Colorado. So I hope you'll get to take a look at that. Next slide. In November and December, we published a suite of resources.
Danielle, your audio went out.
I think while Danielle is working through her audio issues, we can go ahead and move to Dan Lauf, and maybe Danielle can come back.
Do I have audio now?
Oh, okay. Danielle's back.
Great. Thanks. Sorry about that. Did you lose me on this?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So I was mentioning our electric vehicles publications. There are 4 of those. I won't repeat that. Hopefully you heard some of it. We also have a series of publications related to the transformation of the electric grid and the distribution grid in particular. So there's a digitalization in electric power systems and regulation that describes many of the key terms that are being thrown around these days around interoperability, digitization, transactive energy, and other issues coming to the fore. There's also a summary of grid data sharing practices that might be relevant that captures all of the states and utilities that are sharing grid data currently through activities like hosting capacity analyses, and a financial toolbox brief on evaluating ADMS and DERMS investments, which are increasingly being considered by utilities across the country. And finally, in mid-December, we published 2 chapters of a new energy resilience reference guide. One focuses on definitions of resilience, and the second chapter is focused on valuing resilience. Next slide. I wanted to end by giving you a preview of some of the many in-person events that we have planned, some in collaboration with our partners here on the call today. There's going to be a number of regional events around energy justice and energy resilience. Those are in purple and spread out across the coming year. We have a few different site visits that are just for NARUC members, so I won't focus on those. But we look forward to seeing folks along with NASEO and AASHTO at the National NEVI Conference on Electric Vehicles, at NARUC Summer Policy Summit alongside NASUCA in July, a microgrid site visit with NASEO later in the summer, and our annual NCEP annual meeting and NARUC annual meetings in the fall. These resources are, of course, going to be available, as Sarah said, so you can take a closer look at those and feel free to reach out to me or anyone else on the team. The last slide shows contact information for all of us. So we would be happy to connect you to any sources you might be looking for or answer your questions. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. Well, I go ahead and get started. So It's great to see everybody on the line today, and thank you to NARUC and NCEP for bringing this group together on such a regular basis and for giving us the opportunity to present. So I am Dan Loff. I'm the Energy Program Director here at the National Governors Association. Go to the next slide. One more. Just a few quick words on who we are for anybody who's new to this group. We're the national nonpartisan voice of the nation's governors federally and a source of state policy solutions through our Center for Best Practices, which is where I sit. So NGA was founded more than 100 years ago, but at this point we support all 55 state and territory governors. And within our Center for Best Practices, we provide state-based solutions that enhance outcomes in a wide range of areas. For my program, I work closely with governors' energy policy advisors and others throughout the governor's offices to support energy program and policy development and implementation on a wide range of issues. I think probably comparably broad to what you've heard from my colleagues on the line today. In addition to my program, we also we have, I think, 13 or 14 other programs that support issues such as cybersecurity, homeland security, infrastructure deployment, education, workforce, economic development, healthcare, and more. And it's been really great over the past several years to be able to partner closely with these program areas, in addition to the colleagues from our state association peers on the line today to bring, I think, really good, robust programming to our respective memberships. So advancing by 2 slides, actually. So just a couple of recent resources that we've released and one that we're planning to release shortly that may be of value. First is one that came out just a few weeks ago in advance of our annual meeting with the governors in February, is the resource on transmission and siting and permitting, in particular, diving into some of the challenges facing these projects and leading to extended delays and exploring some of the solutions that governors can deploy, working with state partners to accelerate and bring the right partners to the table to move transmission projects forward. Next slide. We're getting ready to release a new report likely next week on state approaches to equitable distributed energy resource deployment, in which we're going to dive deep into some of the actions that governors and state officials can take to make sure that these important resources are widely available to individuals and households across the states. We've been working closely with NARUC and NASEO on a broader effort related to energy justice and equity, and appreciate their input on this paper as well, and look forward to making it available. I think it's one that'll fit in nicely with NCEP's affordability theme this year. The third resource, going to the next slide, that I wanted to flag is one that isn't a new resource, but it's one that I think remains evergreen, particularly given the number of threats that we're seeing to energy and electricity security. And it's really a deep dive into executive authorities during energy emergencies and how states can leverage those authorities to quickly respond, recover, and restore power following an incident. Next slide. We also continue to provide really substantial support to our members on federal funding availability and implementation, both through our energy program and also our infrastructure program, where we've been convening the governor's infrastructure coordinators since the passage of IIJA. So we have 3 websites here that I think should be available when the slides are made available to you all. They're all easy to find on our website as well. One on IIJA, one on IRA, and one on the CHIPS and Science Act, in which we are actively and regularly tracking the various announcements coming out of the Department of Energy and other federal agencies related to program availability, information requests, and funding opportunities. So I encourage you to take a look at those resources and check back regularly, because we do our best to keep them as up to date as possible. So if we can move forward one slide and one more, I'll just quickly run through some of our upcoming events and technical assistance opportunities for governor's offices and for state partners. First, I'm not going to talk about all of these, but I certainly welcome any questions that you all have afterwards, or I'll share my contact information at the end if anybody wants to follow up. But a few that I do want to flag. One is actually a new effort that was announced coincident with our winter meeting with the governors earlier this month, and it's a governor's energy infrastructure working group. Again, it's an outcome of that winter meeting in which governors are going to be working together and with federal partners to find solutions to accelerate major energy projects like transmission and large-scale generation, among others. So this has been a priority of our membership. It's co-chaired by Utah Governor Cox and Louisiana Governor Edwards. We'll also be working closely with a cohort of governor-designated teams later in the year to support grid modernization and resilience efforts. And along with the launch of that, we're planning on hosting a grid resilience training for governor staff and any other state officials who would like to attend. We have an active portfolio on nuclear energy policy at the state level, which includes a forthcoming primer for governors with focus on the 9 newly elected governors and others who are really looking to enter the space on nuclear energy policies and state regulation. And then following that, we plan on hosting an in-person convening with governors, energy staff, and other state officials to explore what it is that states can do on the topic, in addition to providing continued technical assistance. We also are providing technical assistance to our members on a wide range of hydrocarbon and similar projects, things like hydrogen, carbon capture, utilization, storage, workforce planning, and others. Going to the next slide. Our next event that we have coming up, which I'm really happy to flag here, is one that we're partnering closely with NARUC on. It's an energy emergency response training for governor staff and state regulators, really focused on, for those who are perhaps newer to their roles or have not had to go through a major emergency. Should an emergency occur that takes down power or reduces energy supply in some impactful way, what is it that that state officials can and should do to quickly respond and recover from those events? So that's going to be March 14th to the 16th in Kansas City. I don't know why I put Kansas City, Louisiana, because of course it's Kansas City, Missouri. So we'll correct those slides. But registration is open for that. And we have travel assistance available for state attendees. So I'm very much look forward to anyone who's interested attending. We're also working closely with NASEO to finalize a crisis communications playbook for the states. And we'll be working with NARUC later in the year to explore the roles of state fusion centers in energy security information sharing. One other opportunity I wanted to flag is one that's available to all states, not just NGA members, of course, and that is in November of this year, NERC and the Electricity ISAC will be hosting Grid X7. This is an annual energy security event that takes place nationwide. And we've been working closely with the Electricity ISAC over the last several iterations to really make sure that we have an explicit role carved out for state participants, so that there's value in states working with their energy sector peers. And we've been pleased at the level of engagement that we've seen there, and really look forward to helping as many states as possible participate in this exercise virtually. And then we'll be hosting a cohort project with at least a handful of those states later in the year to both facilitate their participation, but also develop some after action resources that focus on the state experience and state findings in that exercise. I also want to mention, just at the bottom of the screen there, in April 25th through the 27th in New Orleans, Louisiana, we will be once again hosting ResCon International. This is an annual event that we host in partnership with the city of New Orleans and Governor Edwards' office in Louisiana that brings together state, local, and private sector resilience practitioners to really discuss a wide range of topics. And as part of the event this year, we're working closely with Pew for what we're calling a Day Zero gathering. So a pre-event targeting specifically statewide resilience leads to explore resilience governance, planning, project funding, and deployment. So that website is one that we can distribute. Registration is open for anybody who would like to attend at the state level or more broadly. So hopefully some of you are able to come and join us. Then moving to our next slide, and this will be my last one. We'll have our annual Energy Policy Institute this year in July in Providence, Rhode Island. I look forward to working with Governor McKee's office to host that. Working with NCSL on that Legislative Energy Horizons Institute to bring some executive branch participation as well. And then, of course, I remain available for any questions that you have. You can see my email address here and on the next slide. And of course, any technical assistance needs from our members or state colleagues. So I certainly encourage you all to reach out if you have questions about anything that I ran through today. And with that, I think that wraps up my presentation. So I will turn it over to Miles next. Thanks everybody for your attention.
Friends, thanks for your time. Can you guys hear me okay? Sorry, it's a little loud where I am.
Yes, we can hear you.
I just got up from a meeting from our Pakistan Air Pollution Consortium, where we're partnering up with folks in Pakistan on air pollution. And that's why I'm here and not at my desk. And sorry about the background noise and the bohemian atmosphere. I'm Miles Keogh, the Executive Director of the National Association of Clean Air Agencies, which is the national nonpartisan association that convenes 157 state and local agencies that implement the Clean Air Act in 40 cities, 40 states, 116 cities, and the District of Columbia. And I really appreciate, like everyone else does, the opportunity to kind of catch you guys up on some of the stuff that we're up to, and I'm really looking forward to more opportunities to work together. Some of the energy stuff that we've very recently been doing is we just got back from a meeting in Minneapolis where we had a visit with Midwest Independent System Operator, and we had a conversation about how to coordinate between clean air agencies and RTOs. And our training work, we have sister associations that do other training work, but we have been working on sensors and the integration of data visualization into air pollution. Our next set of training is on environmental justice and the use of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act to affect compliance with federal clean air laws. I also just want to mention going into this that energy justice paper that CPI did, the one on metrics, is really excellent. And I really appreciate and recommend that one. On March 15th, NACA kicks off a series of workshops around implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act. The 15th, we'll be doing one for state and local governments on the climate pollution reduction grants. It's actually, we've already done one workshop on the air pollution reduction grants, but we'll be back and forthing between those to assist our agencies in taking advantage of the historic amount of money that's gone into that, and how to use planning efforts that states already have to advance that implementation, both in states that are sort of leading edge states and those that are coming up the curve, as well as local agencies, and we're working with the tribes as well. On May 9th and 10th, we're having our next annual meeting, our next member meeting in Denver, Colorado. We'll be talking about environmental justice, IRA implementation. We're bringing in the automakers and the truck manufacturers and to get stoke their readiness. And we'll also be, I'm fishing to try and get Robert Kenney, who many of y'all may remember was a Missouri PUC commissioner and was recently at PG&E, but is now the new president of Excel, to come be one of our keynote speakers, along with leaders from EPA and from Capitol Hill and others. This summer, we're putting on a workshop on permitting and enforcement of the Clean Air Act that's going to have a pretty strong power sector focus. That'll be building off of the issuance of EPA's power sector strategy and power sector rules under Section 111, which we're expecting April, I think. We'll probably end up doing a series of workshops for clean air agencies on those power sector regulations, but we'll see how those look before we roll in on that. We will probably write regulatory comments on that. What NACA mostly does is engage on a regulatory and policymaking basis. We've recently done regulatory comments on the methane supplemental. We're hot and deep on the 111 implementing regs, which if you haven't looked at those implementing regs, they affect things like how the power sector's 111 rules are going to be implemented. So I commend those to your attention. We're already working on comments on the MATS rule. We're doing the particulate matter NACS comments right now as well. Those are not finalized and not yet adopted by the administrator, but we're ready for them. And once that power sector strategy comes out, we're guaranteed to be up in the business of trying to find consensus across national consensus on what we think the environmental outcomes of EPA's power sector rules should be. Finally, I hope you'll mark your calendars for October 10th through 12th. That's when NACA reconvenes in Washington, D.C. We always get great people from the Hill and from the power companies and from manufacturers and car makers and environmental groups to get together and have pizza with us and figure out what the right way to advance clean air and equitable climate protection for all. And we're looking forward to doing that. Thanks again to NARUC and the National Council and the other N groups for letting me come aboard. I'm looking forward to your questions if we have time. Thanks.
Miles, we did have a request from the Q&A. I think they're talking about the CPI energy equity metric report that you're talking about, but they asked you to re-reference the energy equity metric study.
What I'm going to ask Danielle, would you be able to either drop a link to your energy justice paper, that's just metrics? That's the one that I particularly made reference to. Metrics are always like a demon, right? Like, and certainly with what we spend a lot of time on environmental justice, it's very easy for that to become a moral question rather than an implementation question. And the metric stuff really goes a long way on energy justice to addressing that. NACA is really trying hard to, we've already articulated environmental justice metrics, but I really admired the sophistication and the simplicity of NARUC's mini guide in that space. So I commend that one too as well.
Thank you, Miles. I did put that a link to that paper in the chat. And thank you to all of our speakers for sharing the work that their organization is doing today, as well as the Department of Energy for supporting this work. We unfortunately do not have any time for Q&A. This was another information-packed session. But I encourage you to reach out to any of our speakers today with any questions you may have or follow-up. Their contact information should be on today's presentation, which once again will be posted on our website in addition to this recording. With that, I'd like to thank everyone who attended today's webinar, and I hope to see you once again at some of NCEP's future events. Thank you and take care.